Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We have with us Bear Carlin. Excuse me, I did that backwards. Carlin Bear Alandas from Eastern Roadside Creation. So ERC Knives, which is also just up front, is a trusted partner for the Iowa Firearms Coalition. So you've been kind enough to offer IFC members a discount. Thank you for that. You guys out there should be understanding the value of membership beyond what IFC does for you and for others is a series of discounts and bargains that you can have. So keep that in mind. That said, let's delve right into it. What is Eastern Roadside Creations? Tell us.
We're a family-owned and operated blacksmithing shop and school located in Indianola, Iowa.
Did you say school?
Basically, me and my wife make, yeah. My wife and I also teach year-round for knife making, leather working, kind of all the basic stuff.
Wow, I did not know that the school was part of it. Do you have many students?
Yeah, I'd say we've taught a few hundred people by now.
Okay.
Kind of year-round, we just have people give us a holler and come hang out and make a knife for a day or two.
All right. So are you relieving flat stock, or are you forging, or what is it you're doing here?
We do both here, actually. We do stock removal, which is taking precision flat ground stock and turning it into a knife. And then we also forge. We make our own Damascus. Off and on, we work with stuff like meteorite, titanium, and other stuff like that when forging. So we kind of do a little bit of all of it, honestly. Outside of pocket knives. Don't quite do pocket knives yet.
So fixed blades more so than folders, or do you do folders also?
Yeah, no folders yet. All fixed blades for now. We're almost at folders, but not quite.
Okay. All right. I was looking down through some of the products, and what was the one that caught my eye? Oh, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right, so don't make fun of me. Or at least if you do, wait till I'm out of earshot so I can't hear it. Lil Seppa.
Yeah, that's right. Seppa is Finnish for Smith, so it's the little Smith's knife is what I called it.
Man, that sucker is perfect. I do a fair amount of hunting, and my daughter's 15, and she's been into it for several years now. That, I don't know, it's a little hard to gauge by picture. I mean, but when I look at stuff like that, I think to myself, that might be perfect for light-skinned game and white-tailed deer and that kind of stuff. So that is really a really nice-looking unit.
Thank you. Actually, that is our most popular knife that we have ever made, that series. There's 3 of them, the little, the baby, and the large.
All right. Fantastic. Very cool. All right. So we've had a few people on here that have talked about how to pick out or best practices maybe to pick out an everyday carry knife for the purposes of defense. And then a few of the things that go with that, like this is actually a defense knife. It's not a Phillips screwdriver. It's not a box opener. And so we walked through a few things like that. But okay. One of the things that we weren't able to really touch on thoroughly, which I'd like to talk with you about, is are there knife materials that we should be looking for long-term use, and are there knife materials that we should be looking for when it comes to heavy use? Because it may not be the same thing. So do you have any recommendations on things like that?
Yeah, actually, so like usage is kind of everything, and how well it's going to hold the edge in the usage is going to be kind of the primary factor you're trying to look at when selecting a knife steel. And that's why sometimes you'll love a knife design, but if you're cutting boxes all day, you hate the knife because it won't hold an edge. That's going to be part of that. So, I mean, for real rough use, a knife that you're going to kind of abuse and you just kind of want to hold an edge for a long time when cutting abrasive materials like plastics and boxes and cordage and things like that, you're actually going to want to select a stainless. One of the S series or a CPM series steel, which are very popular, are just wonderful steels for that. I personally like AEBL and Nitro V, which are 2 kind of up and coming super stainless steels, they call them, which makes them, not as prone to rust as other stainless might be, and just real tough, real good at edge retention. If you're hunting and you're in the field and you maintain your knives, you're probably going to want to look at a real nice high carbon knife. High carbon can be sharpened on stones. It can be sharpened with the hone. It's a very simple steel that wears easy. But in the field, trying to sharpen stainless becomes a real problem. You usually want diamond to sharpen stainless. And if you leave your sharpening stone at home, it's kind of nice to be able to look around, pick up a river rock and kind of strop your blade or roll down your car window and use the edge of your window to kind of get a new edge on there. You have options with high carbon in the field that you don't with stainless.
Rolling down your window to sharpen a blade. I never thought that I would hear that, especially on Warrior Wednesday. That makes total sense. I use special kinds of glass to basically stone 1911 parts and some precision trigger parts because it's exceedingly hard and flat and works great. I never once thought about doing that. That's gold. Thank you for that. So, that leads into a really good question. If I'm sharpening a kitchen knife, or I'm sharpening my pocket knife, or I'm sharpening my hunting knife, are there places that I can go buy a kit, something portable, something easy to use to sharpen these? Because it seems like if you use your knives, eventually they're going to dull. Either that, or if you buy a knife that's so hard and whatever else that it dulls, it takes a long time to dull it. Now it takes a long time to sharpen it properly. So what does average Joe go look for, and can they buy that's easy and cheap, or does that even exist?
It does. It does. I like the Lansky diamond system, and you can find them at all sorts of different knife shops. You can find them on Amazon. They're a small American company that they rock. They have one that has stones in it, but I personally don't like that because if you're doing a lot of sharpening, the stones get dished. They kind of get hollowed out in the center. And so eventually you either have to reflat them or you don't get the same edges you were getting at the beginning. With the diamond system, that's not going to happen. So, and it's going to cut real good too, which kind of helps, makes the sharpening go a bit faster, That's going to be the optimum setup for a rookie in general. There's a jig that holds the knife in place, and there's a wire that attaches to the stone, holds it at a nice angle for you. You select your angle, and then you just run it up and down the knife, sharpening it until it's good. That's going to be, like, in my opinion, the best place to start for a nice little field kit / home kit that is just going to make sure you do a good job, no matter how good or bad you are initially at sharpening.
So I have this. You can imagine in a gunsmith shop, there are grinders everywhere and all kinds of fiber wheels, whatever else. So I have this grinder set up. It's huge. And on one side is a kind of a huge, for lack of a better way of explaining, an emery cloth that's very fine wheel. Mm-hmm. The other side is like a fibered or fibroid wheel. And so I don't know what you call it. I face or true the blade with the emery cloth side, and then I go over the other one and I sharpen it real quick, a few times like that. And if it cuts a piece of newspaper, I go on. And when I have some buddies that are really into edged weapons, that because I am not, I know enough to be dangerous, right? They see me do that, and I can see either a cringe or the blood drain out of their faces. So am I doing that really, really poorly or not?
Now, it sounds like you're using a surface conditioning belt to set just kind of a nice pattern on the knife again and clean it up, and then you're actually sharpening it during the second step. I would probably add some sort of like stropping system in there, maybe like a small 1x30 with a leather belt and some compound on it or something like that, and get that foil kind of straightened out a little bit so that your edge lasts longer. You'll get a passable working edge the way that you're doing it, but that working edge will get a lot sharper and last a lot longer if you add some sort of stropping towards the end of the system that you're using.
Okay. All right. I do have strops. And then one time a gentleman talked me into, it looks kind of like it looks like a billy club, and it's got leather with different colors on four sides and whatever else. And there are some different compounds for it. And I do have that, but I'm not real clear on exactly how to use that. I'm assuming YouTube would guide me, or how should I be using that?
Oh, any kind of YouTube video about stropping will kind of get you in the general direction. I mean, it's the same thing you see during the old school movies where the barber's sitting there going back and forth with his razor. All you're trying to do is just kind of straighten up the foil that happens at the end of the grind when you're doing your final grind off through your machine.
Okay. All right. So tell us a little bit about, you said you and your wife are operating this business where you build knives, and I'm assuming you're semi-production and also custom. And you're also teaching others, which I thought was very cool. Thank you for that. How did this become a thing? How did you delve into blade work to begin with?
This is just a hobby that got out of control, man. I started doing it as a kid, kind of goofing off, and I mean, we surely weren't doing it right. You know, the old classics, taking a file, grinding a knife into it, and oh, for about the first 20 years, I threw away every knife attempt I ever took a run at because something just didn't go right. And then got back into it and started making knives. Neighbors bought a few, and one of my neighbors recommended I go to a gun show and throw a few knives on the table. They all sold, and oh, about 6 months later, I opened up my business, quit my job, and that's all I've been doing ever since. The
Wow. How
teaching
long
is
has that been?
just since 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, right around mid 2017, I'd say, is when we formally opened.
So when you say that you're teaching students, I mean, do people, are they coming? What's a course length? How much time in terms of days or hours are you talking about here?
There's kind of two ways to segregate it. There's like the classroom setting and the experience setting. So like coming in and forging maybe like a steak hook for turning steaks and chops on the barbecue, coming in and maybe making like a railroad spike knife. Those are going to be a 2 to 4 hour class. It's more like an experience where you're having fun playing with it, but while you're learning, you're not learning too much. You know what I'm saying? So the actual classroom type setting, you're coming in, and I offer two introductory classes there, I guess, are good examples. The first one is a forged knife class. You come in the first half of the day, you forge and heat treat the knife, and in the second half of the day, you get it sharpened up and paracord handle wrapped on it. And you leave with kind of a nice camp chopper that you made yourself that you can trust. And the second, and that's an all day, starts about 9 o'clock in the morning, ends between 3 and 5 p.m. in the daytime. It's pretty fun, pretty straightforward. You learn all the real techniques of how to do this at home during that class.
Man alive. This conversation is so out there. This is so great. Thank you. I mean, and the reason I say that is almost every time I have a guest on, I know what they're going to say, and I know that what we're going to talk about. And I almost never, with the exception of like a legislative piece or a secret, that gets aired, or, oh, we're going to do this thing with our business, I never hear anything that wows me. I'm sitting here thinking in my mind, Bear, I've offered to send my wife and my daughter to like a cooking class. Here's where you're going to go for 4 hours. You're going to sit down. Mom's going to sip on maybe a drink of wine. My daughter's going to have sparkling grape juice, and they're going to learn how to make puff pastries or something, right? And they're going to come home with these little creations that they're proud of and practice a little bit, and I'll get fatter, and this is all going to work out, right? But what you're talking about is I will be able to have somebody come in and experience this on a basis similar to what I just said. Come into my cooking class, and oh, by the way, what we're going to cook is an edged weapon, is a knife, is whatever it is. I've never even heard of anything like that before. This is very cool. I'm thinking of all the people that I could recommend or buy gift cards for it. Oh, that's, by the way, do you sell that? I mean, do you sell gift cards so people can do that, or what?
We do during the holiday season, but we try to limit it so we never get too far behind in just kind of having money on hand is spoken for, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So usually payments are done on the day of class if we can help it, and we just kind of reserve things on faith for the most part. As a small business, you don't want to have too much money in limbo, I have learned.
So people are leaving with things that they're pretty darn proud of. I mean, is that kind of your experience, or
Every
does
time.
it really? So, wow, that blows my mind that people would come and take a class like that and leave something that's smiling from ear to ear. I mean, do you have repeat students then that want to come back for that kind of thing, or how does that work?
Oh yeah, we've had students that come to us at least 2-3 times a year for the last 3-4 years in different shops we've been in. Even it's a privilege. We can take people to kind of more advanced levels in some of the things like Damascus patterning, working with exotic materials. So we have a lot to offer up to about the intermediate level of knife making. And then after that, you kind of do need to be studying with like a registered master in some ways to really further that, get that final bit of knowledge and stuff kind of solidified, But we get you kind of really along your feet well placed on the path, I might say, with good fundamentals. We're real big on fundamentals here.
Fantastic. So are your students local, or do you have quite a few of them travel?
We've had families from all over the place come, like Wisconsin, local, you name it. I mean, Florida. We have people coming from all over.
Wow, that is very cool, man. I'm going to get off this call at some point. I'm going to go into the house and ask my wife if she wants to learn how to make her own knife. See what kind of
You'd be
reaction I get.
surprised.
What's that?
You'd be surprised. Recently, we actually had a husband and wife come on in with a son and three daughters, and I'll tell you what, them girls were driving the steel as fast as anybody else, and everybody had a blast.
Fantastic. Wow, man, this is very cool. All right. So you teach short term. Do you teach long term? Are you taking in apprentices and working with them for a period of time?
Not really. If anybody wants to keep showing up, they can basically pay for their materials and keep hanging out. But I mean, I'm not a master. I don't need to be taking apprentices. I mean, don't get me wrong. Someday I want to have somebody that sticks around long enough to get trained up that they can kind of partner up with me or something. But really, until you earn the title of master from an accredited place, you really shouldn't be calling anybody an apprentice. You know what I mean?
I do. I do. People have journeyman status for a reason. There are guilds, and those words mean something, and they're not to be taken lightly. So that's a tremendous amount of respect that you're offering the community. Thank you for that. All right. So we covered a little bit about maybe some of the metallurgy we need to be thinking about when we make knife choices, and also you're primarily working with fixed blades. And the student and the teaching aspect of it. So what are some of the other things that we need to be thinking about when we talk about the technical aspects of edged weapons?
Technical aspect really is kind of dictated on use. A knife that is wonderful at one job is not wonderful at others. I mean, if you think about it, there's a whole lot of knife designs out there. So many, in fact, that it's remarkably difficult to be like original in this day and age. Yeah, I mean, at some point we've all been putting different dresses on the same pig, you know what I'm saying? So like it's very hard to kind of stand out design wise. But at the same time, I mean, if you got a combat knife that doesn't have a guard, you probably have a problem. Your hand's going to slip up on the edge and you're going to get hurt. If you've got a kitchen knife that's heavy, that's kind of foolish because, you know, 5 to 15 pounds of potatoes later, you're going to be Popeye on the right and olive oil on the left. Not a good combo. You know, a good skinner should be light. It should be thin. So when you're using it, it's not getting hung up on bones and joints and things like that. It needs to be moderately flexible. Bushcrafter should be overbuilt and tough so that if you get in an emergency, it's just real reliable and you got that meat there to kind of play loose and fast if you need. Yeah. So like, just be kind of aware of the use that you're going for. Some knives that are terrible at just about everything else are really good at one thing. Taxidermists will talk to you all day about that. They have some of the goofiest looking knives you've ever seen, but they're real handy in specific little applications.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd be looking at.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was it. That was it. Yeah, sorry.
I've seen a lot of taxidermists, or I shouldn't say a lot. The few that I use, I've seen a lot of those of the few that I use scalpels and razor knives for a lot of stuff. I mean, they seem like they're really working small finesse knives to do some of that stuff. It's really interesting to watch them. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I've got friends, and I know he watches all these, the one I'm thinking of, and he won't miss this when I say it because I don't necessarily critique him all the time, but he does scare me. He has a heck of a lot more confidence in his self-defense knives than I do, and he likes, you know, he's a knife guy from way back. So he's got all these self-defense knives that there's no place for your fingers really. They're almost they're razor blades with another razor blade hanging off it that's not quite as sharp to hold on to, you know, for folders kind of thing. And I look at him and I'm like, ugh, and I cringe. And he's like, what's the matter? I said, well, if I actually did use this in self-defense, I would cut off both of my first two fingers for sure. And he's like, well, you're going to get cut in a knife fight. I said, I know, but I just can't imagine using this without a tremendous amount of harm to myself. And he's like, well, what are you going to use? I'm like, and then I'll whip out something like an Emerson Karambit. I'm like, this is what I've got in mind, you know, and I'm a little less likely to cut my own hand off, you know. So I not having a ton of edged weapon coursework, there are some of them that I think that are far better suited for those jobs than others. And I realize the beauty and the workmanship and the effort that went into a lot of these designs, but they don't look like something that I would ever use with any level of success. I mean, is that a thing, or am I just being paranoid?
Well, believe it or not, the evolution of these kind of fighter blades that we have now is kind of really simple to explain it if you think about it. It's all based on their style. You got Marines that hold the blade down and they're tucked up tight. They need a blade that can slash and stab. So it makes sense to give them a clipped point. You got the rounded belly to extend the slash out, and you got the clip for backslash and stabbing. You've got the Fairburn Sykes tactical dagger, which lets you know they're basically trying to punch you to death full of holes. That's literally what it's designed for. It's not the best slasher in the world, let me tell you. They're just too light. You got the Tanto, curved, no regard. It means they're going to slash the heck out of you, death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's actually kind of a big thing. I mean, usually it starts out as something very primitive and kind of clunky and then gets refined down. And if you look at the Fairburn Sykes, it's a perfect example of how that got leaned out over time.
Yeah.
And the K-bar versus the like U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army survival knife, which is basically a very much smaller scaled down version of a K-bar style knife, is a perfect example of that.
Amazing stuff. All the things that we think we know that we don't know. So what are good ways for us to actually gain that knowledge? I mean, unfortunately, it's been my experience since I'm far better with firearms than I am with any kind of blade in terms of my depth of knowledge and my use and understanding. It looks to me like, I mean, let me back up. If I was really interested in being frustrated worse than I am and walking around with a desire to close my own hand in the car door for fun, I would spend a lot of time on forums listening to net rangers and keyboard commandos tell everybody what they needed to know about guns, because they're as dumb as they are stupid. I can barely handle reading any of it anymore, so I don't bother with it. So, but there are really good sources here and there for some of this information that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, and I think they do the public a great deal of service. So when it comes to an edged weapon, whether it is a really nice medium-sized chef knife for your wife, or that you might use yourself, or excuse me, your spouse, I should have said, or whether you're trying to pick up a really good hunter skinner or a self-defense or whatever else, what are resources that you'd recommend people that they go watch? I mean, what YouTube channels are valuable that people could glean some information from? Do you have a list of those?
Not YouTube channels. I know 3 forums that are incredibly helpful that I can recommend. As far as YouTube channels where people go over stuff, no one's really gotten that to a degree that I'd recommend it yet.
Okay.
For forums, I recommend first Knife Dogs. It's run by a fellow I actually personally know out of Minnesota who's really awesome. And it's actually mostly makers and some enthusiasts. So like most of the time you're talking to makers and you're able to go through past chats that are just really informative. And a lot of times you will get master smiths and journeyman smiths weighing in with concrete knowledge that allow you to grow while you're seeing somebody who asked the same question as you did. Another place that you will find that would be bladeforums.com. They are old, they are established, and just a rich resource in general.
Okay.
And the last one would be, for people who want to learn about making more, would be iforgeiron.com. Between those 3, you've got like just a real wealth of resources in front of you, and the people are very approachable to new questions. They actually have separate pages there just for people to ask questions so they can link them to past conversations. It's a very friendly place in general.
Okay, so those 3 again were what? Knife Dogs. What was it?
Knifedogs.com, bladeforums.com, and iforgeiron.com.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. And so do people need to be members to see all the content? They need to sign up?
Almost all of it's public. Almost all of it's public. You can just go search on it right now and see what's going on. You get better ratings on your posts and stuff, and it's considered very supportive. But no, you can lurk on there and just kind of soak up knowledge without having to pay for much of it.
Okay. So tell me this. What thing do you see people like me who aren't particularly bright, what things do you see guys like me do wrong all the time? Whether it's blade care or blade sharpening, whatever else, what things could you tell us that we could improve our game with? And it's okay if you hack on me. That's fine. I mean, use me as an example.
No. It's just going to make you laugh. The biggest one is please stop by and fake Damascus as a whole. I know they look cool. I know they have a cool pattern. But oh my God, they're just so bad.
Okay, why? What makes them bad?
Huh?
What makes them bad?
Well, that's kind of interesting, actually. Most of them come out of Pakistan, and they're kind of just different contrasting materials that aren't actually blade steels. And so the truth of the matter is, I mean, that's kind of where all this stuff kind of originated and has stayed going the longest as far as Damascus goes worldwide. So if they ordered a boatload of good steels, they'd run every maker out of the country, out of Damascus, about 2 years. Everyone would just stop making it. No one would keep up. It's the quality of the metals that are in them. And, usually you scratch at the blade with your fingernail lightly and you'll feel these big caverns kind of in between the layers. That's the usual indicator that they etched it in battery acid and then polished the top. So you now have a shiny and black contrast kind of thing and stuff like that. It's just the big one is just kind of don't buy the fancy blades, buy the useful ones and find reputable local makers and try to find knives that they can't keep up with making and get those because there's usually a reason that they're popular, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that. I've got a handful of stuff. Golly. Bark River, does that sound right? I used to buy a bunch of their stuff. They seem like they do. I mean, I don't know if they're great or terrible. I have bought a lot of that over the years. I've never used much of it. I just bought it and stuck in the safe. There are a couple of small timers that, I bought stuff from Casey Bradshaw and Jeremy Horton and some of those guys that were friends of friends, whatever else. And I've been happy with what I bought. I've seen some stuff around here. I don't know their names, but I've seen some things that I thought, that actually looks pretty tough. And it appears to be well crafted, well made. I used to be worried that I would need to see something on there that said like Gerber or Schrade or something. Not that they're good knives or bad knives. I just seemed like I needed that name brand. And I've kind of moved away from that now. If I find somebody that appears to be reputable, and then if they have the referrals, because the proof's in the pudding. So have you used this? What were your experience after you actually used it? I've got no problem. And I like buying local. I'd much rather do that than send money to somebody who's either a Chinese company or sourcing it all from Southeast Asia. I really would.
That makes sense. Actually, that's the hardest part right there about being a knife maker. And that's something that we kind of talk to a lot of the younger makers that are very enthusiastic, very seriously about is that, you can make 1 million knives. You really can. But if you don't have a community that only buys 2,000, that's actually a problem. It doesn't actually matter how many knives you make per se. It matters how much your community kind of supports you and how it grows. And building that community in a local place is actually remarkably difficult.
I believe that. It takes a long time to establish any kind of public persona, any kind of following, and it's pretty easy to trash it. And so that works from a individual business standpoint. It also works, unfortunately, from a community standpoint, depending on how local you are. I mean, that can be a big deal. And it's kind of funny you talk about don't buy cheap Damascus because it looks pretty. That's what I did for my daughter. I would have bought her a Civivi. It was a nice little knife. I saw about the Civivi Damascus. Okay. And a friend of mine was like, hey, I like these little knives. They seem to work fine, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, that's great. I'll try one. So I did that. And the reason that I did it is because I wanted her buy-in. I knew that she was going to lose this knife. She hasn't yet, to my knowledge, or maybe it's lost right now and she just hides it from me, so I don't know. But I wanted her buy-in, so that's why I got her that, knowing that she would lose her first knife, just like everybody loses their first sunglasses or their watch or whatever. But I wanted her to get in the habit of having it with her, and then after she kind of has the training wheels out of the way as a young girl, then I'll move into, hey, let's commission a knife to be built that you'll have all the time. Or what are you going to use a pocket clip, or would you rather actually have something on your belt? And the reason that I say that is we spend a lot of time in Southern Colorado because we have a vacation home there, and it's in the boonies. When I say boonies, I really mean it. So every man, woman, and responsible child is carrying a gun and a knife at any given time. You run into them everywhere. And all of the young girls and all the young boys, or most anyway, have a small, maybe 2.5 inch or 3 inch blade, a fixed blade that's in their belt. That's moving, parallel with their belt, usually in the back. And they whip it out and do everything from cutting stuff, the wrap off bales, to anything you can imagine. And I just noticed everywhere you go, all these kids have those. And I asked this one little guy, I'm like, hey, and he was a pup. I mean, he was like 7, you know. And I said, hey, what's with the knife? I said, what do you use it for? He says, you don't want to know. And I'm like, okay, that's the best answer I've heard all day. But they're seasoned and they're used to them, that kind of stuff. My daughter was not. And is not. So that's why I bought her a cheap POS or a cheap knife, so that when it got lost, I wouldn't be upset. But she kind of had some training wheels. So, or was that an actual mistake? Or should I show her, bought her something decent to lose?
There are two things in general that drive every knife maker that really gets deep into the weeds and making knives and doing it for a living kind of nuts. And one is that sharp knives actually typically don't cut people. Dull ones do. They slip instead of cutting through and biting deep into where they were supposed to.
Yep.
And so I'm always kind of hesitant, although Civivi is a decent knife, actually, as far as an entry-level knife. So, no, you didn't make a mistake. But as far as picking a knife that doesn't hold an edge very well, that can sometimes make it a little bit more dangerous. And the only other thing that drives us bananas is the fact that you would think that the thicker the knife steel, the tougher and more flexible it's going to be. But realistically, when you do have a good heat treat, the thinner you take it, the more flexible it gets, which can make it kind of tougher with proper use. Those two things drive us nuts.
Yeah, I can see that. I remember when my daughter was very little, I don't remember, 9 or maybe 10, we wanted to start doing a lot of cooking together, because I found it was a way for us to have a lot of conversations, a lot of time, rather than sit there and stare at each other and get weirded out because we didn't relate, because we weren't the same. You know what I'm saying? I thought, well, maybe we could have an activity where we work side by side and conversations will flow much easier. And that ended up being the case at work. And we talked about how we wanted to prep for the kind of cooking that we wanted to do. And then we watched about every video that you can imagine and went and talked with some people, a couple kitchen show or whatever shows they were. And we ended up learning that first. The best way to get in a lot of trouble is with a dull knife. They're actually not safe. Sharp knives are safer than dull knives. And my daughter was like, well, why would it be like that? I said, well, you're going to misuse them. You're going to apply pressure and angles in the wrong ways to get it to do what it would do if it was sharp. And the next thing you know, you'll slip or whatever else and you're cut or worse. And so, and oh, by the way, you seem to inherently have far less respect for a knife that's dull, that you've been using dull for a while, and you compensate poorly. So we ended up finding knives specifically that we wanted by certain manufacturers and certain styles. And then we bought them piece by piece. And if you look at the knife rack that we built, that we together with little magnets and whatnot and all that kind of stuff, it's a blend of all kinds of different things. There's some of them there to start with M's or whatever that are German. I don't remember, something Hoff. And then there's like some Victorinox and a few things in there here and there, in different styles and whatever else. And they work great, and we're okay with that. And I'm sure they're much, much better, mind you. But that's kind of how we started out. And I think that it was probably an okay way for us to begin, unless you are going to tell me I stepped in it again.
No, I'd say that's a pretty good way to start. Like, not everybody has to have a custom knife for everything, is the truth. There are plenty of good working blades out there. But if you want good quality, then it's a good idea to get a good made one from a maker that you can kind of trust, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But not everybody can afford it, man. I can't always afford the stuff that I make like everybody else.
Yeah, I know. That's exactly right. The one thing I did want in a kitchen knife, just because of laziness, was stainless steel, because I wanted to. Well, I knew that I wouldn't treat them probably how they should be treated. I've got a friend who had somebody, he commissioned some sort of obviously a Japanese inspired, maybe a chef's knife or something that would be called that. But it's an absolutely beautiful knife. It's uber sharp, and he does a really nice job of maintaining it. I like using it and watching him use it. But his criticism is plain and simple. He's like, this knife requires a ton of oil and care, or it will rust. And there's absolutely no way around it. This is if you want to call it an Achilles heel, he's like, you have to maintain this knife and take care of it, or it'll look bad in a hurry.
He's absolutely right. I actually only make custom high carbon knives for the kitchen anymore. I don't keep them on the table. I don't make them in any way, shape, or form regularly anymore because of that problem. I mean, even if you cut an acidic vegetable, you can patina the blade almost automatically, and the person becomes unhappy if they weren't expecting it. Mm-hmm. It led to some irritated folks every once and again the first couple of years before we switched to stainless.
Yeah, I could see that. His knife does have stains on it, whatever else, which don't bother me. I don't know. I've got a pair of true brass knuckles that Casey Bradshaw made for me. I don't know, man. Might have been 10 years ago, and they look rough. I mean, they've got all kinds of patina on, but some people really appreciate that. I do. When I build custom weapons for people and they bring them in here years later and they are worn hard, I like that. I like seeing that something gets used, and I really appreciate that. And there are some people that want to use their knife and put it away and it looked just like brand new all the time. And I don't care about that, but some folks do.
Well, it's just, I think usually you kind of start wondering when you cut a potato and you see the white flesh of the potato with this black kind of haze in it from the patina. And that's when you kind of realize you like antiques, but you don't like eating them.
I'm using that. I'm going to say that at some point, so I'm stealing that. Thank you for that.
My gift to you.
I like using antiques but not eating them. All right. Okay. That's a good one. Okay. So is there anything that we haven't covered that you think folks might be interested in hearing? So this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you again, by the way.
I honestly can't think of anything. I'm better at answering questions than coming up with topics, to be honest with you.
Okay. All right. I think we've checked some of the boxes, but I found it fascinating that you're teaching students on a very short time frame and for a few hours up to a day-long course where they take something on with them that's of value and quite an experience. That's absolutely phenomenal. That's very cool.
Thank you.
Very
It's
cool.
honestly, it's kind of a dream to be. So we're kind of lucky and blessed to be able to do such a thing, truthfully.
I'm glad for you, man. I really am. So should I ask, do you have children? Are you rearing them up?
Yeah, 3 sons.
3 sons?
Yeah.
Are they out there in the shop from time to time, or do they like other stuff better?
No, yeah, the eldest has rather severe autism, so I don't want to let him go around the machinery just in case he tries to turn something on most of the time. And then the other 2 are 3 and 1 years old, so we're just going to kind of wait to see if they want to before we start pushing it that early. When a kid gets burned, they probably don't want to be in the shop, so we got to wait until they want to try it in this kind of a job setting.
Yeah,
but they do help us like dye leather and simple things like that. We treat it kind of like family craft time when we can.
Oh, you're doing leather work for these knives also?
Yeah, we do all the sheaths, everything in house. We literally do everything in house.
Wow. I had no idea. I didn't realize that. Well, I saw when I was looking on your page, I should mention that ERC Knives, plural, ERCKnives.com. I was looking at the products page and I see the sheath for every single knife there, but it didn't dawn on me that was part of the service. Though that's fantastic.
Yeah, early on we learned it's almost impossible to sell a knife if it's not sheathed, and it doesn't sound like it'd be that difficult until you ask yourself, how does the customer carry it out of a gun show or a craft show?
Right.
And all of a sudden you realize it has to have a sheath of some sort.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Okay.
We got lucky to be taught how to do leather by a local guy out of Oskaloosa. I'd like to shout out to Shakaya Leather and Gunworks if that's okay. They're awesome.
Yeah. So how do we spell that?
Shakaya, Shakaya Leather and Gunworks. They're local out of Oskaloosa and Phil and Mary are awesome.
Fantastic. All right. Those might be people that I need to visit with if I haven't already. Okay. Fantastic. I don't know. I think we've had a great day. I'm really glad that you set aside some time for us. So again, ERC Knives, we got Carlin Bear Islandus and his wife, Ashley.
Yeah. Ashley.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you for your support as a trusted partner of the Iowa Firearms Coalition and the membership. And hopefully this will be of value to some people so they can get a little perspective here. So thank you very much for taking the time today, man.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
All right. Off we go.